In the winter of 1095, in a field outside the small town of Clermont, a single speech changed the course of history. A pope stood before a massive crowd and spoke of suffering in the East, of holy places under foreign rule, and of a duty that transcended kingdoms and bloodlines. When his words ended, thousands cried out in unison, convinced that God himself had spoken through him. In that moment, the Crusades were born. Europe at the end of the 11th century was violent, deeply religious, and fractured by constant warfare. Knights fought endlessly among themselves, peasants lived under fear, and the church struggled to impose moral order. The idea of redirecting violence outward, toward a sacred cause, offered both spiritual meaning and social control. To fight was no longer merely an act of ambition or survival, it became an act of faith. Those who took the cross believed they were embarking on a journey of salvation. Many saw the expedition as penance, a way to erase sins through sacrifice and suffering. Others were drawn by honor, land, or the promise of adventure. For some, it was desperation. For others, opportunity. Faith and ambition walked side by side. The first to depart were not kings or seasoned generals, but ordinary people. Farmers, laborers, women, and children marched eastward driven by zeal rather than preparation. Their journey quickly descended into chaos. Hunger, violence, and fear followed them. Entire communities were destroyed along the way, and many never reached the lands they sought. Their tragedy revealed a harsh truth. Belief alone could not sustain an army. Soon after, the true military expeditions began. Noble lords led disciplined forces across Europe and into unfamiliar lands. The journey was brutal. Heat, disease, and scarcity tested every marcher. Yet the armies pressed on, driven by conviction and momentum. City after city fell through siege, negotiation, or betrayal. Victories were celebrated as divine favor. Defeats were interpreted as tests of faith. When the Crusaders finally reached Jerusalem in 1099, they believed they were standing at the center of the world. After weeks of siege, they broke through the defenses. What followed was a massacre that shocked even some contemporaries. Civilians were killed indiscriminately. The holy city was claimed through bloodshed, and prayers of thanksgiving echoed through streets filled with corpses. To the Crusaders, the end justified the means. To history, the moment remains one of the most disturbing episodes of religious violence. From the conquest emerged new Christian states in foreign lands. Castles rose, orders of warrior monks were formed, and a fragile society took root amid hostile neighbors. For a brief moment, it appeared that the Crusades had succeeded. But the balance of power was already shifting. Muslim leaders, once divided, began to unite. A new generation of commanders emerged, disciplined and strategic. They learned from defeat and prepared for retaliation. As years passed, the Crusader states weakened, isolated by distance and internal rivalries. The conflict was far from over, it was only evolving. The fall of Jerusalem to Muslim forces in the late 12th century sent shockwaves across Europe. What had been gained with blood was lost through defeat. Once again, the call to crusade echoed across the continent. Kings answered this time, leading vast armies eastward in one of the most famous campaigns in medieval history. These new crusades were larger, better organized, and driven by both vengeance and survival. Battles were fought along coastlines and deserts. Victories were celebrated but rarely decisive. Negotiation became as important as warfare. The holy city itself remained elusive, protected not only by walls but by political reality. In the end, compromise replaced conquest. As the Crusades continued, their original purpose blurred. Some expeditions never reached the Holy Land at all. Others turned against fellow Christians, driven by political debts and manipulation. One of the most infamous crusades ended not in Jerusalem, but in the sack of a Christian capital, leaving lasting scars between East and West. The idea of holy war had slipped from spiritual mission into instrument of power. Over time, enthusiasm waned. Later crusades struggled to inspire the same devotion. Repeated failures drained resources and confidence. The last Crusader strongholds eventually fell, marking the end of Christian rule in the region. After nearly 2 centuries, the military phase of the Crusades came to a close. Yet their impact did not end there. Europe was changed forever. Trade expanded, knowledge flowed between cultures, and new horizons opened. Technologies, goods, and ideas traveled westward. At the same time, distrust hardened between religions. Memories of violence lingered, shaping perceptions for generations. In the Islamic world, the Crusades became a symbol of resistance against foreign invasion. Leaders who expelled the Crusaders were remembered as heroes. Unity forged in conflict reshaped regional politics. The scars of war were deep, but so was the sense of survival. The Crusades cannot be reduced to a single motive or outcome. They were driven by faith, fear, ambition, and hope. They produced acts of courage and acts of cruelty. They inspired devotion and justified atrocities. Above all, they revealed how powerful belief can become when merged with authority and violence. The legacy of the Crusades is complex and uncomfortable. They remind us that history is rarely simple, and that actions taken in the name of the sacred can produce both creation and destruction. What began as a cry of faith ended as a lesson in consequence. The world that emerged afterward was irrevocably changed, bound together by centuries of conflict, memory, and meaning.